Sanctuary! Today we're talking about The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. A bit of a departure because The Hunchback of Notre Dame is not a fairy tale. However, its existence in the Disney Renaissance catalog is part of the reason that a lot of people asked me to do this one. And I said yes because I love this messed up story. I wish more people knew about it. I was in middle school when this movie came out in the late 90s, and I loved it so much. My parents bought me the actual book, The Hunchback of Notre Dame. And I tried to read it. As a middle schooler, it was a little bit above where I could go. But then I read it again later and I was like, wow, this is different. Because yeah, almost nothing is the same except the names and the place, but they're both great somehow. An interesting difference about The Hunchback of Notre Dame in Victor Hugo's version is that the protagonist is arguably La Esmeralda, not Quasimodo. The story really centers around her and the men who want her for their own. She is a Romani dancer, and I'm going to be using the term Romani, the correct term. They use a slur for those people in the book and in the Disney movie. So everything begins with the whole Feast of Fools thing, which is actually on January 6th. Unfortunately, here in America, that date has other connotations now. In the Disney movie, Judge Frollo murders this Romani woman and raises her deformed baby. In the book, he's not a judge, he's the Archbishop of Notre Dame. He's a priest. They changed that probably to be less offensive to Catholics or to religious people in general because he's even worse in the book than he is in the movie. But in the book, there's no murder. Quasimodo was left on the steps of Notre Dame, but we find out more about that later. And he is way more deformed and really disabled than he is in the movies. He's half blind, he's almost completely deaf. Like in the movie, he sneaks out on the day of the Feast of Fools and he gets discovered and named the Pope of Fools, not the King of Fools, Pope of Fools, for being incredibly ugly. And everyone like parades him around, but then Frollo comes in, he's mad, he's like, no, stop this, and they stop it all. But then they're all distracted by the beautiful dancing La Esmeralda. Now, the reason she's called that is because she has this like rhinestone version of a emerald necklace she always wears. She's had it since childhood. She doesn't know who her parents are, and she's hoping it can help her find them someday. And also, she's 16 years old. So there's this dude, Gringoire, who is a poet and a playwright, and he sees Esmeralda, and he's instantly in love with her. And he like follows her to try and be like, hey girl, what's up? But then Frollo sends in Quasimodo to kidnap Esmeralda. Like, as soon as he sees her, he's like, you know, Quasi, kidnap her for me. And so in the scuffle, Gringoire gets knocked out and ends up somehow wandering into the Court of Miracles where he meets Clopin, the narrator from the Disney movie, the leader of the Romani people who were like hiding out in the catacombs. So Quasimodo, played here by Lon Chaney in the 1920s silent version, he doesn't succeed. Soldiers swarm in and stop him from kidnapping Esmeralda, and she gets away. So she runs away to the Court of Miracles where Gringoire is going to be hung for being an outsider, and she agrees to save his life by marrying him. And he's like, sweet, I'm saved, and she married me, but she's like, I'm not going to let you touch me though. This was just to save your life. We're not doing anything. And he's like, oh man. But he starts to become very fond of her goat, Jolly. Just like in the cartoon, it performs with her and it's smart and can perform little tricks and stuff. Quasimodo is arrested by Phoebus, who we're gonna meet, and unlike the Disney movie, he's a dick in the book. He's just the worst. Or he's almost the worst. Frollo's worse. I don't know. You really can't. You'll see. Anyway, so he's taken and beaten in the town square, flogged, and then left in the pillory for people to laugh at him. And that's Disney kind of hints at that with him being tied down and the tomatoes thrown at him, but he's like bleeding from being beaten, dying of thirst, and Frollo's just letting it happen because he doesn't want people to know he was behind the whole thing trying to kidnap the girl. So a real famous part is La Esmeralda being the only person who shows kindness and pity on him by bringing him water while he's just suffering up there. And Quasimodo falls in love with her because of this act of kindness. So while being rescued earlier, La Esmeralda had fallen in love with Phoebus. She thinks that he is dashing and charming, and he is a douche. He wants to sleep with her and has no plans to marry her, even though she so wants to marry him. He's engaged to be married to a really rich woman named Fleur-de-Lis. And so he sets up an arrangement to meet like in a hotel room, basically, with Esmeralda, and she meets up with him there. And his whole plan is just to lie and seduce her, and she goes there completely innocently. Now, Frollo has like put on a cloak and followed them. And so the next scene happens, it's so creepy and gross, where Frollo is basically peeking through the boards to watch Phoebus trying to seduce Esmeralda. Phoebus kissed her beautiful neck. The girl suddenly raised her head, her face crimson like a cherry. The priest gnashed his teeth in the dark. Frollo gets so jealous, he bursts in with a knife to stab Phoebus, and he injures him, but not fatally. And then he runs off, and Esmeralda faints after having seen his face. She faints, and when she wakes up, she's under arrest for the attempted murder of Phoebus because they think she did it. And they also throw in witchcraft because why not? So she is tortured so badly that she falsely confesses to the crime. She's sentenced to hang. While she's in prison waiting to be hung, Frollo comes to her and tries to get with her, and she recognizes him, and she's like, no, ew, you're gross and horrible. But as she's being led to the gallows, that's when Quasimodo swoops in on a rope and saves her, claims sanctuary in that famous scene, and under that special law, while she's staying at the church, she can't be hurt. At least for a while. So while she's staying out at the church with Quasimodo, Frollo gets a key, because he's the archdeacon, comes into her room and tries to S.A. her. Quasimodo bursts in, beats the crap out of him, but then realizes who he is and has a moment where he hesitates, and Frollo says to Esmeralda, if I can't have you, no one can. The song Hellfire in the Disney version is such a gorgeous, perfect piece of art. In fact, one of my most viewed TikToks is just a clip of Hellfire saying how great it is, because it just encompasses this idea that it's your fault that I want you, and if I can't have you, then you have to die. I mean, the self-righteous religious misogyny, the original incel energy. Ultimately, this story is about a bunch of dudes trying to victimize a 16-year-old girl, and the one decent guy trying to save her, but spoiler, he can't. Frollo goes to the court of parliament and gets her right to sanctuary revoked because he wants her to die now. Clopin and the other Romani hear about this and they storm the cathedral to try and save her, but Quasimodo thinks that they're trying to harm her, so he fights them off. In the commotion, Frollo gets Esmeralda again, and he's like dragging her into an alley while the riots are happening and tries to get her to love him again. She still says no, and so he runs off to get the authorities, but leaves her trapped with someone important. So he leaves her with this woman holding on to her who has chosen to wall herself up and be a recluse or hermit because of grief when her daughter was stolen by the Romani 16 years ago. By the way, the idea of the Romani stealing children is a very old and harmful and terrible stereotype. So this woman believes the Romani cannibalized her daughter, but as she's holding Esmeralda there, they both realize that Esmeralda is her daughter. Quasimodo was actually born to a Romani family, and they were so disturbed by his deformity, they left him on the steps of Notre Dame, and to replace him, they stole this girl. Her real name is Agnes. Esmeralda's better. So the woman comes out of her cell, embraces her. They have this moment of happiness together that is immediately ruined by the soldiers coming to take Esmeralda away. And in the scuffle, they inadvertently kill her mother. So she's dead now. And I almost forgot, when they take Esmeralda to be hung, they have also convicted her goat, Jolly, of being an agent of Satan. And they're supposed to hang the goat too. But Gringoire, the guy that she married to save his life, her fake husband, he ends up saving the goat. He can't save her, but he can save the goat because he grew fond of it during their fake marriage, so Jolly ends up being okay. So they hang Esmeralda, and she dies, and Quasimodo watches from another tower. And he becomes so enraged, he does kill Frollo this time, pushing him off and having him fall to his death from Notre Dame. Quasimodo vanishes and is never seen again until years later, a gravedigger is cleaning out this mass graves in a catacomb-like area and find Esmeralda's remains and the deformed skeleton of a hunchback with its skeleton arms around her, holding her, implying he laid down to die with her corpse and just slowly starved and died holding her dead body. The guard attempts to pry the skeletons apart and they crumble into dust. Definitely not the Disney-fied ending at all. The Disney movie has some of the best music in any Disney film ever, but this one has such great drama. If you missed the news, I do have a podcast now, and I have a new episode dropping this Friday about Rapunzel and all of the ideas of people trapped in towers, kind of Quasimodo-like. The link is in my bio. It's called Folktales and Fairy Lore. And Hunchback of Notre Dame actually does tie in a bit to my 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, Dustspell. The three main sister characters in this book are of Romani descent and talk a lot about Romani fairy tales. And they even specifically talk about Hunchback and the whole deal with stealing children and Quasimodo being the real Romani and not Esmeralda. So check out my book, check out my podcast. Have a great day.